Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of the massive warship Dominion's edge, watching the small blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. Earth looked peaceful from this distance, with white clouds swirling over green and brown continents. It reminded him of dozens of other worlds he had conquered during his long military career. "Status report," he commanded, in the clicking language of the Zephyrian hegemony. "All ships in position, Admiral," his tactical officer replied. 150 vessels ready for standard conquest protocol. The target world shows no signs of advanced defense systems. Kethvar nodded with satisfaction. This would be another easy victory to add to his record. The Zephyrian hegemony had been expanding across the galaxy for 3,000 years using the same proven method. Show overwhelming force, destroy a few key targets, wait for surrender. It worked every time. He pulled up the intelligence reports on his personal screen. The humans of Earth were classified as a Category 3 species by hegemony scientists. They had basic technology, used primitive chemical rockets to barely reach their own moon, and still fought wars among themselves using crude weapons. Most importantly, their history showed they would surrender when faced with a clearly superior enemy. The xenobiologists had studied thousands of hours of human communications intercepted by long-range sensors. The pattern was always the same. When humans faced an enemy they could not defeat, they surrendered. Sometimes quickly, sometimes after token resistance, but they always gave up in the end. It was a rational response that every intelligent species eventually learned. "Begin Phase 1, Kethvar ordered. The first step was always to get the enemy's attention. 3 Zephyrian destroyers moved into Earth's atmosphere and positioned themselves over what the humans called New York, London, and Tokyo. These were major population centers that would serve as perfect demonstration targets. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple communications from the planet's surface," the communications officer reported. "They appear to be attempts at contact in various human languages." Kethvar barely glanced at the translations scrolling across his screen. The messages were always the same on every world. Pleas for communication, offers of peace, demands to know who they were. It was all meaningless noise before the inevitable surrender. "Ignore them," he said. "Proceed with demonstration." The 3 destroyers fired simultaneously. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, turning the centers of the 3 human cities into puddles of molten glass. The destruction was precise and clean, designed to show overwhelming technological superiority while minimizing overall casualties. Dead populations could not serve the hegemony. "Excellent work," Kethvar said as he watched the mushroom clouds rise from Earth's surface. "Now we wait for their response." The response came within hours. Human military forces around the globe launched what appeared to be their most powerful weapons. Primitive nuclear missiles rose from silos and submarines, racing toward the Zephyrian fleet. The sight made Kethvar almost feel sorry for them. It was like watching children throw stones at armored warriors. The missiles struck the fleet's energy shields and simply vanished, their nuclear fire absorbed harmlessly. Not a single Zephyrian ship suffered even minor damage. The demonstration was perfect. Earth's most powerful weapons had proven completely useless. "Now broadcast the surrender terms," Kethvar instructed. The standard message went out in the major human languages, translated by the ship's computers. The terms were generous, as always. Complete surrender within 72 standard hours. The humans would be allowed to keep their basic civilization in exchange for serving the hegemony. Local governments could remain in place as long as they followed hegemony law. No more humans would be harmed if they complied. Kethvar settled, back in his command chair, to wait. 72 hours was usually more time than most species needed. The smart ones surrendered within the first day. The stubborn ones might hold out for 2 days before accepting reality. 3 days was the absolute maximum he had ever encountered. The first day passed with no response from Earth. This was not unusual. The second day brought scattered reports of human military activity, but nothing coordinated or threatening. Small groups of humans were apparently trying to attack individual Zephyrian scout ships with their primitive weapons. These attacks were easily repelled and caused no real damage. Kethvar viewed them as the final desperate actions of a defeated enemy. The third day came and went. Still no surrender. On the fourth day, Keithvar began to feel the first stirrings of confusion. No species had ever taken this long to accept the obvious. He ordered his intelligence officers to scan human communications more carefully, looking for signs of internal debate about surrender. What they found instead disturbed him. Human communications networks were buzzing with activity, but not the kind they expected. Instead of discussions about surrender terms, humans were sharing technical information. Scientists were collaborating across former enemy nations. Military leaders who had been fighting each other months earlier were now coordinating joint operations. Admiral, his xenobiologist, said during the morning briefing, "The human behavior is not following predicted patterns. They appear to be treating our presence as a unifying threat rather than a reason for surrender." Keithvar frowned. "Explain." Historical analysis suggested humans would fragment under pressure, with different nations attempting to make separate peace deals. Instead, they appear to be uniting. Former enemies are sharing resources and information at unprecedented levels. This was troubling but not yet alarming. Continue monitoring. They will surrender once they realize resistance is hopeless. But humans seem to be reaching the opposite conclusion. Over the following days, Zephyrian scouts reported increasingly bold human attacks. The primitives were learning to work together in ways their divided history had never shown. More concerning, they were beginning to adapt their tactics based on observed Zephyrian responses. A week passed. Then 2 weeks. Still no surrender. Keithvar found himself studying the tactical reports with growing unease. Human attacks were becoming more sophisticated. They had learned to target scout ships during atmospheric entry, when shields were recalibrating. They were using their own communications networks in ways that made them difficult to jam completely. Most disturbing of all, they were starting to reverse engineer damaged Zephyrian technology. "How is this possible?" he demanded during another briefing. "Our intelligence clearly showed this species surrenders when faced with superior force." "All historical data supports that conclusion," the xenobiologist replied nervously. "However, it appears our arrival may have triggered an unprecedented response. The humans seem to view extinction and surrender as equivalent outcomes." "That's illogical," Keithvar snapped. "Surrender allows survival. Resistance leads to death." "Yes, Admiral, but the humans appear to believe that survival without freedom is not actually survival at all." Keithvar stared at the tactical display showing Earth and its surrounding space. Red indicators marked the locations of ongoing human resistance activities. There were far more red dots than there had been a week ago, and they were spread across a much wider area. For 3,000 years, the Zephyrian hegemony had built their empire on a simple truth about intelligent life. When faced with annihilation, rational beings would choose survival. Every species they had ever encountered eventually made this choice. It was the foundation of their entire conquest strategy. But as he watched the red indicators multiply on his display, Admiral Keithvar began to suspect that the humans of Earth might not be entirely rational. And for the first time in his long career, he was not certain that his fleet was large enough for the task at hand. The conquest of Earth was not proceeding according to plan. Dr. Sarah Chen crawled through the maintenance tunnel beneath what used to be Beijing, carrying a backpack full of alien technology. The tunnel was cramped, dark, and filled with the constant sound of dripping water, but it was safe from the orbital scanners that swept the surface every few hours. 3 weeks had passed since the aliens destroyed the city centers. 3 weeks since the world changed forever. Sarah had been a quantum physicist at Beijing University before the invasion. Now she was part of humanity's desperate attempt to turn alien weapons against their creators. She emerged from the tunnel into an underground chamber that had once been a subway station. The platform had been converted into a makeshift laboratory, filled with salvaged equipment and the soft glow of alien power cells. Dozens of people worked at improvised workbenches, their faces lit by the strange blue light of Zephyrian technology. "Any progress?" asked Dr. Martinez, looking up from a partially disassembled alien device. The Spanish physicist had arrived 2 days earlier through the underground network that now connected resistance cells across the globe. Sarah nodded and carefully unpacked her backpack. I managed to get close to the crash site outside the city. The aliens tried to destroy their scout ship, but they didn't do a complete job. She held up a crystalline component that pulsed with inner light. This appears to be their main power regulator. Around the world, similar scenes were playing, out in hidden locations. The aliens had expected humanity to surrender after their show of force. Instead, they had accidentally provided Earth with the greatest learning opportunity in human history. In the ruins of Moscow, engineer Viktor Petrov worked in a buried facility that had once been a nuclear bunker. He had spent years designing power systems for Russian spacecraft. Now he was trying to understand alien energy technology that seemed to violate several laws of physics. The power output is incredible, he explained to his team, pointing at readings on a jury-rigged scanner. This single cell produces more energy than our largest nuclear reactor, but the radiation signature is completely different. It's like they've learned to harness the strong nuclear force directly. His assistant, a young woman named Anna, looked up from her own work. Victor, I think I understand how their weapons focus system works. Look at this. She had connected an alien targeting device to a human computer using cables and components scavenged from across the city. The improvised interface flickered to life, displaying targeting information in alien symbols that slowly resolved into something resembling human mathematical notation. It was crude and unstable, but it worked. Similar breakthroughs were happening everywhere humans could get their hands on alien technology. Every crashed scout ship, every damaged probe, every piece of debris became a treasure trove of advanced science. The aliens had made their first crucial mistake by underestimating human curiosity and adaptability. Admiral Kethvar watched the reports from his orbital command center with growing concern. Human resistance was not decreasing as predicted. If anything, it was becoming more organized and more dangerous. The primitives were doing something that should have been impossible. "Show me the latest intelligence summary," he ordered. His tactical officer brought up a holographic display of Earth. Red markers indicated known resistance sites, which now numbered in the thousands. More troubling were the yellow markers showing locations where humans had successfully modified Zephyrian technology. "Admiral, they appear to be learning from our own equipment," the officer reported. "Initial analysis suggests they are reverse engineering our systems at an unprecedented rate." "That should not be possible," Kethvar said. "Their technology level is primitive. They barely understand their own nuclear physics." "Yes, sir. However, they seem to be approaching our technology from completely different theoretical frameworks. Where we use crystalline matrix systems, they are creating hybrid interfaces using their electronic computers. The results are crude but functional." Kethvar studied the display in silence. The pattern of human activity was unlike anything in hegemony records. Most conquered species either surrendered quickly or fought with increasingly desperate and disorganized resistance until they exhausted themselves. Humans were doing the opposite. Their resistance was becoming more coordinated and more sophisticated with each passing day. "What about their communications?" he asked. "That's perhaps the most concerning development," his communications specialist reported. "They've managed to create a distributed network that we cannot fully monitor or disrupt. Former enemies are sharing technical information freely. We've intercepted data exchanges between human scientists on different continents who are collaborating as if they were in the same laboratory." This was the second crucial mistake the Zephyrians had made. They assumed that a species divided by conflict would remain divided under pressure. Instead, the threat of extinction had caused humanity to unite in ways it never had during peacetime. In underground facilities across Earth, former enemies worked side by side. American and Chinese scientists shared data without reservation. Russian engineers collaborated with European physicists. Military officers who had been preparing for war against each other now coordinated joint operations against the alien occupiers. The change went far beyond simple cooperation. Humans were adapting their entire society to the demands of the resistance. Children too young to fight became messengers, using their small size to move through areas too dangerous for adults. Elderly people who could not handle weapons became teachers, passing on technical knowledge to the next generation. Even artists and writers joined the effort. using their creativity to solve problems that traditional military thinking could not address. Dr. Chen looked around her underground laboratory and marveled at what humanity had accomplished in just 3 weeks. They had gone from primitive chemical rockets to working with alien energy systems. They had gone from divided nations to a truly global resistance network. They had done the impossible by refusing to accept that it was impossible. Sarah called Dr. Martinez from across the chamber. "You need to see this." She hurried over to his workstation, where he had connected several alien components in a configuration that made no sense according to human understanding of physics. But the device was working, producing a stable energy field that looked remarkably similar to the shields protecting the alien ships. "How did you make it work?" she asked. Martinez grinned. "I stopped trying to understand it and started trying to copy it. We don't need to know why it works, just how to make it work for us." This was perhaps humanity's greatest advantage. The Zephyrians approached technology through rigid, theoretical frameworks built over millennia of scientific development. Humans approached it with desperate creativity and a willingness to try anything that might work, regardless of whether it made theoretical sense. Above ground, the first successful human attack on a Zephyrian patrol ship had just taken place. The ship was brought down by modified human missiles guided by alien targeting systems and powered by improvised energy cells. The victory cost 3 resistance cells their lives, but it proved something crucial. The aliens could be hurt. The news spread through the underground network within hours. From hidden bases around the world came a single message, transmitted in 100 different languages but carrying the same meaning. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would adapt, and humanity would find a way to win. Admiral Kethvar received the report of the lost patrol ship just as he was preparing his daily message to Hegemony Command. For the first time in his career, he found himself uncertain about how to explain what was happening on Earth. How could he tell his superiors that a primitive species was learning to use hegemony technology against them? How could he explain that instead of breaking under pressure, the humans were becoming stronger and more united? He began typing his report, then stopped and deleted it. Then he started again. The conquest of Earth was not proceeding according to any known pattern, and Admiral Kethvar was beginning to suspect that it might not proceed according to plan at all. Captain Maria Santos gripped the controls of her modified fighter as it screamed through Earth's upper atmosphere, chasing a Zephyrian scout ship. 6 months ago, she had been a test pilot for experimental aircraft. Now she was flying a machine. That would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. Her fighter was a strange combination of human engineering and alien technology. The basic frame was built in underground factories using Earth materials, but the engines were powered by alien energy cells. The weapons were guided by Zephyrian targeting computers, and the pilot interface included alien neural connections that let her think her commands directly to the ship. "Target locked," she said into her communicator, speaking to the control center hidden beneath the ruins of Mexico City. "Beginning attack run." The alien scout ship was fast, but Maria had learned its patterns. The Zephyrians flew with mechanical precision, following textbook maneuvers that made them predictable. Human pilots had learned to use chaos and unpredictability as weapons. She fired her hybrid missiles and watched them streak toward the alien ship. The scout's defensive systems activated, shooting down most of the incoming weapons, but Maria had expected this. The real attack came from behind, where 2 other human fighters had been waiting in the planet's shadow. The Zephyrian ship exploded in a brilliant flash of energy. Maria felt a moment of grim satisfaction as she watched the debris scatter across space. It was the 15th alien ship her squadron had destroyed this month. "Good kill, Phoenix Leader," came the voice from ground control. "Return to base." As Maria guided her fighter back toward Earth, she thought about how much had changed. The first successful attack on an alien ship had happened 3 months ago and had cost the lives of 30 brave resistance fighters. Now human pilots were bringing down alien scouts regularly, and the kill ratio was steadily improving. The key had been learning to think like the aliens while fighting like humans. The Zephyrians had superior technology, but they used it in predictable ways. They had been conquering planets for thousands of years using the same tactics, and those tactics had made them lazy. Humans, on the other hand, had spent their entire history fighting other humans. They understood adaptation, deception, and the art of turning enemy strengths into weaknesses. Every human military tradition, from ancient Chinese strategy to modern guerrilla warfare, was being applied to the fight against the aliens. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, Commander Zhang Wei supervised the construction of humanity's first space-based manufacturing facility. The base had been carved out of lunar rock using alien mining tools and was powered by a fusion reactor built from reverse-engineered Zephyrian components. "Production report," he requested from his chief engineer. "We're now producing 12 fighters per day," the engineer replied. "The new automated systems are working better than expected. We should be able to increase that to 20 per day within the month." Zhang nodded with satisfaction. The lunar facility was humanity's greatest secret. The aliens knew humans were building things on Earth, but they had no idea that the resistance had already spread beyond their home planet. Human engineers had used captured alien shuttles to establish bases on the Moon, Mars, and several asteroids. The space-based facilities served multiple purposes. They were safer from alien orbital bombardment. They had access to raw materials that were hard to find on Earth, and they allowed humans to study alien technology without interference. Most importantly, they represented something the aliens had never seen before in a conquered species: the ability to expand beyond their homeworld while under occupation. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Central Command." Zhang moved to the communications station and put on the encrypted headset. The voice that came through was that of General Patricia Hayes, the former American Air Force officer who had become one of the leaders of the global resistance. "Zhang, we need to discuss the Australia operation," she said without preamble. "Intel suggests the aliens are planning to establish a major ground base there. We can't let that happen." "Understood, General. What's the timeline?" 2 weeks, maybe less. They're moving equipment and personnel from their orbital stations. If they get that base established, it'll give them a platform for pacification operations across the entire Pacific region. Zhang studied the tactical displays around him. The lunar base had been producing weapons and fighters for 3 months now, and they had built up a substantial inventory. More importantly, they had developed new weapons that the aliens had never seen before. "General, I think it's time for Operation Thunderstrike." There was a pause. Operation Thunderstrike was humanity's most ambitious plan yet. It would reveal the existence of their space-based capabilities to the aliens, but it might also deal a blow that would change the course of the entire war. "Are you sure we're ready?" General Hayes asked. "As ready as we'll ever be. And if we wait much longer, they'll establish enough ground bases to make any major operation impossible." "Approved. Begin preparation immediately." The plan was elegantly simple and completely impossible by pre-war standards. Human fighters launched from bases on Earth would coordinate with ships from the lunar facility to attack the alien fleet in Earth orbit. The aliens would expect resistance from the planet's surface, but they would not expect to be caught in a crossfire from space. It would be the largest military operation in human history, involving forces from every continent and every major resistance cell. American pilots would fly alongside former enemies from Russia and China. European engineers would coordinate with African logistics specialists. The entire species would unite for one massive assault. Admiral HFY received the first reports of increased human activity with growing alarm. His intelligence officers had detected unusual communications patterns and increased manufacturing activity, but they could not determine what the humans were planning. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're seeing coordinated movement from resistance cells on all continents. They appear to be positioning for some kind of major operation." "Increase patrols," HFY ordered. "Double the number of scout ships in the inner system, and prepare our ground force deployment to Australia. If we can establish a permanent base there, we can begin systematic pacification operations." But even as he gave these orders, HFY felt a growing sense of unease. The humans had surprised him repeatedly over the past 6 months. They had proven capable of technological adaptation that should have been impossible. They had shown a level of coordination and determination that went against everything the hegemony knew about conquered species. Most troubling of all, they seemed to be getting stronger rather than weaker as the occupation continued. Every month brought new reports of successful human attacks, improved human technology, and expanded human operations. It was the exact opposite of the pattern that 3,000 years of conquest had established. "Sir," his intelligence chief said during the morning briefing, "we've detected some unusual energy signatures from the direction of Earth's moon. It might be worth investigating." The moon? Kethvar was puzzled. Why would humans be operating on their moon? They barely have the technology to reach it. Unknown, sir. But the signatures are consistent with industrial activity using power systems similar to our own. For a moment, Kethvar wondered if he was beginning to lose his grip on the situation. The idea that humans could have established operations on their moon while under occupation was absurd. But then again, everything about this conquest had been absurd from the beginning. "Send a scout ship to investigate," he ordered. "But maintain our primary focus on the Australia operation. We need that ground base established as quickly as possible." As his officers hurried to carry out his orders, Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display showing Earth and its surrounding space. 6 months ago, the display had shown a clean conquest situation with clearly marked alien positions and scattered human resistance. Now it was a confused maze of uncertain intelligence and growing human capabilities. He was beginning to understand why the hegemony had never encountered a species like humanity before. Most intelligent races learned to surrender when faced with impossible odds. It was a survival trait that helped species avoid extinction, but humans seemed to treat impossible odds as a challenge to be overcome rather than a reason to surrender. And they were becoming very good at overcoming the impossible. The thought sent a chill through Admiral Kethvar's consciousness. If humans were capable of establishing operations on their moon while under occupation, what else might they be capable of? He was about to find out. Fleet Admiral Zeth Cole studied the tactical reports from Earth with growing disbelief. The human resistance had not only survived 18 months of occupation, but had somehow grown stronger. The latest intelligence was almost impossible to accept. "Repeat that last section," he commanded his intelligence officer. "Sir, our scouts confirmed the humans have established military installations throughout their solar system. We've detected active bases on their moon, Mars, and at least 12 asteroid locations. Power signatures indicate full manufacturing capability." Zeth Cole had been called in to replace Admiral Kethvar after the situation on Earth deteriorated, beyond any reasonable explanation. The Hegemony High Command had finally realized that this was not a standard conquest operation. It was a war, and they were losing it. "How is this possible?" he demanded. Their technology was primitive. They had barely reached their own moon with chemical rockets. "Sir, they appear to have reverse-engineered our technology at an unprecedented rate. Our xenobiologists estimate they've advanced their technological base by at least 3 centuries in less than 2 years." The number made no sense. No species had ever shown that kind of adaptive capability. The very idea contradicted everything the hegemony knew about technological development and learning curves. And their military capabilities? Extensive, sir. They've produced over 2,000 hybrid fighters, established orbital defense platforms around Earth, and deployed mobile weapon systems throughout the inner solar system. Intelligence suggests they're also in contact with resistance movements on 12 of our occupied worlds. This last piece of information was what had finally prompted the hegemony to send a full war fleet instead of a conquest force. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were actively undermining the entire hegemony by encouraging resistance on other worlds. "Show me the force assessment," Zeth Cole ordered. The holographic display activated, showing the current deployment in the Earth system. Red markers indicated confirmed human installations, while yellow markers showed probable locations. The solar system that had been nearly empty of significant military presence 2 years ago now looked like a heavily fortified star system. "This is not a primitive species anymore," his tactical officer observed. "They've essentially recreated our technology using their own manufacturing base. In some cases, their hybrid systems are actually more efficient than our original designs. Zethkol nodded grimly. The humans had done something that should have been theoretically impossible. They had leapfrogged millennia of technological development by combining alien knowledge with their own innovative thinking. The result was a hybrid technology that was both familiar and completely unpredictable. What's our fleet strength? 500 ships, sir. The largest war fleet the hegemony has assembled in over a century. We have enough firepower to sterilize the entire planet if necessary. It won't be necessary, Zethkol said firmly. We're going to end this properly. The humans have proven they won't surrender, so we're going to remove their ability to fight. The plan was simple and overwhelming. The war fleet would systematically destroy every human installation in the solar system, starting with the outer bases and working inward to Earth itself. No negotiations, no mercy, no chance for the humans to adapt or respond. Just pure, devastating force applied until nothing remained. But as the hegemony fleet moved into the Earth system, they found that the humans had one more surprise waiting for them. Commander Sarah Chen, now wearing the insignia of the United Earth Resistance Navy, watched from the bridge of the battleship Defiance as the alien war fleet approached. The ship was humanity's greatest achievement, a massive vessel, built in the asteroid belt using alien technology and human engineering. Enemy fleet confirmed, reported her tactical officer. 500 ships, mixed classes. They're maintaining standard formation. Sarah smiled grimly. The aliens were still thinking like conquerors facing a primitive enemy. They had no idea what they were about to face. Signal all units, she ordered. Operation Thunderstrike is now active. All resistance forces engage at will. The battle began not with the thunder of conventional warfare, but with the silent flash of energy weapons. In the vacuum of space, human fighters poured out of hidden asteroid bases, supported by missile platforms that had been disguised as space debris for months. The Zephyrians found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, a technologically advanced enemy that fought with human tactical flexibility. The aliens had superior numbers and firepower, but the humans had home field advantage and 18 months of experience fighting their technology. Human commanders had studied every battle, analyzed every tactical pattern, and learned to think like their enemy while fighting like humans. They used the asteroids as cover, employed hit-and-run tactics that the rigid Zephyrian doctrine couldn't counter, and coordinated attacks across multiple vectors simultaneously. Admiral, the Zephyrian tactical officer reported with panic in his voice. We're taking heavy casualties. The humans have weapons we've never seen before. Zethkol watched in shock as his carefully planned assault dissolved into chaos. Human fighters darted between his ships like angry insects, their hybrid weapons punching through shields that should have been impenetrable. Worse, the humans seemed to know exactly where his ships were most vulnerable. How are they targeting our weak points so precisely? He demanded. Sir, intelligence suggests they've been studying our technology for over a year. They appear to know our ships better than our own crews do. This was the humans' greatest advantage. While the Zephyrians had spent 18 months trying to understand why humans wouldn't surrender, humans had spent that same time learning everything they could about their enemies. Every captured ship had been dissected and analyzed. Every battle had been studied for tactical intelligence. The humans knew Zephyrian ship designs, weapon capabilities, shield frequencies, and tactical doctrines better than most hegemony officers. They had turned their enemy's own technology into a weapon against them. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human forces, the communications officer reported. Put it through, Zethkol ordered. The image that appeared on his screen was of a human female in military uniform. Behind her, he could see the bridge of what was obviously an advanced warship. Admiral Zethkol, the human said calmly, I am Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Resistance Navy. I have a message for you and your fleet. What is your message, human? Leave our system immediately, or we will destroy every ship you have brought here. You have 1 hour to begin your withdrawal. Zethkol almost laughed at the audacity. His fleet still outnumbered the humans by a significant margin, Even after the initial losses, you are in no position to make demands. Actually, we are. Chen's expression didn't change. You're thinking like conquerors facing a primitive enemy. But we're not primitive anymore, and we're not just defending our home. We're fighting for our species' right to exist. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried an edge that made Zethkol suddenly uneasy. You taught us that surrender means extinction, so we chose to make extinction as expensive as possible for you. The question is, how much are you willing to pay? As if to emphasize her point, alarms began sounding throughout the hegemony fleet. Human forces had somehow infiltrated their formation and were attacking from within their own defensive perimeter. How did they get past our sensors? Zethkol demanded. Sir, they appear to be using stealth technology based on our own systems. Our sensors can't distinguish their ships from our own until they begin firing. Zethkol stared at the tactical display as more of his ships disappeared under coordinated human attacks. The primitives who should have surrendered in 3 days had somehow built a space navy capable of challenging the hegemony's finest warfleet. And they were winning. Sir, his communications officer said quietly, we're receiving reports from other sectors. Human agents have made contact with resistance movements on 17 of our occupied worlds. They're sharing weapon designs and tactical information. The full scope of what was happening finally struck Zethkol. The humans hadn't just been fighting for their own survival. They had been preparing for a galaxy-wide revolution against the hegemony. Every day they had survived had been another day to spread their knowledge and inspire other conquered species. On the screen, Commander Chen was still waiting for his response. Behind her, he could see human crew members working with calm efficiency, as if fighting a superior alien fleet was just another day at the office. These weren't the primitive, easily conquered species that the hegemony had been expecting. These were humans, and humans had chosen to rewrite the rules of conquest itself. 2 years after the first alien ships appeared over Earth, Fleet Admiral Zethkol found himself sitting across a conference table from Commander Sarah Chen in a space station built from both human and Zephyrian technology. The meeting itself would have been impossible to imagine when the war began. Let me understand your proposal, Zethkol said, his translator rendering his words into perfect English. You want us to withdraw completely from your solar system in exchange for what exactly? Sarah leaned forward, her expression calm but determined. Information. We've spent 2 years studying your technology, your tactics, and your empire. We know about the 17 other species you've conquered. We know about the resources you extract from their worlds. We know about the resistance movements that exist on most of your occupied planets. She activated a holographic display that showed a map of Zephyrian space. Red indicators marked known resistance activities, while yellow showed planets where human agents had already made contact. We also know about your other enemies, she continued. The Kree coalition that's been attacking your eastern border, the Vorthan Empire that's been raiding your supply lines. You're not just fighting us anymore, Admiral. You're fighting on multiple fronts, and each one is getting more expensive. Zethkol studied the display with a mixture of admiration and unease. The humans had somehow gathered intelligence about hegemony operations across half the galaxy while fighting for their own survival. It should have been impossible. How did you obtain this information? Sarah smiled slightly. We're very good at learning things. Every ship you've lost, every piece of equipment we've captured, every communication we've intercepted has taught us something new about your empire. We know more about the hegemony than most of your own citizens do. This was not an exaggeration. Human intelligence operations had reached a level of sophistication that the hegemony had never encountered. The species that had been using primitive radio communications just 2 years earlier was now intercepting and decoding classified military transmissions from across the galaxy. What exactly are you offering? Zethkol asked. A new kind of relationship, Sarah replied. We'll share our hybrid technologies with the resistance movements on your occupied worlds. We'll provide them with weapons, tactics, and coordination. We'll turn every planet you control into another Earth. The threat was delivered calmly, but its implications were staggering. The hegemony's entire economic system depended on the resources extracted from conquered worlds. If those worlds became as troublesome as Earth had proven to be, the Empire would face economic collapse within a decade. Alternatively, Sarah continued, we can work together. The hybrid technologies we've developed are more efficient than your original designs in many cases. Our manufacturing techniques could revolutionize your production systems. Our tactical innovations could help you against your other enemies. She paused, letting the words sink in. We're not offering surrender, Admiral. We're offering partnership, but only if you're willing to change the fundamental relationship between the hegemony and the species you encounter. Zeth Cole had been studying human psychology for months, trying to understand how they had achieved the impossible. Now he was beginning to grasp the deeper truth about their species. You're not just fighting for your own freedom, he said slowly. You're fighting to change how the galaxy works. Exactly. Every species you've conquered had the potential to contribute something valuable to galactic civilization. Instead, you turned them into resource extraction operations. You wasted their creativity, their innovation, their unique perspectives. Sarah activated another display, this one showing technological developments that had emerged from human-alien collaboration, medical advances developed by human doctors working with alien biologists, new materials created by combining human chemistry with alien physics, weapons systems that were more effective than anything either species could have built alone. This is what's possible when species work together instead of one dominating the other, she explained. We've proven it works. The question is whether the hegemony is willing to try a different approach. The proposal was revolutionary in the literal sense. For 3,000 years, the hegemony had built its power on conquest and subjugation. The idea of voluntary partnerships with other species went against everything their society was built on, but the alternative was becoming clear. The war with Earth had already cost the hegemony more resources than any previous conquest. If humanity carried through on their threat to support resistance movements throughout hegemony space, the Empire would face rebellions on dozens of worlds simultaneously. You realize what you're asking, Zeth Cole said. You want us to fundamentally restructure our entire civilization. We want you to evolve, Sarah replied. The same way we evolved when you forced us to. You taught us that our old way of thinking wasn't sufficient for survival. Now we're teaching you the same lesson. Over the following weeks, negotiations continued between human and Zephyrian representatives. The discussions were unlike anything in diplomatic history. Humans who had been fighting for their lives just months earlier were now offering to share their hard-won advantages with their former enemies. The key breakthrough came when human scientists demonstrated a new type of faster-than-light drive, based on hybrid technology. The design was more efficient than anything the hegemony had ever built, cutting travel times between stars by more than half. How did you develop this? Asked the Zephyrian chief scientist who had been brought in to verify the technology. Dr. Martinez, now the head of Earth's Department of Xenotechnology, smiled. We combined your spatial folding theory with our understanding of quantum mechanics. Neither approach worked perfectly on its own, but together they create something entirely new. The demonstration proved Sarah Chen's fundamental point. Cooperation between species could produce innovations that neither could achieve alone. The hybrid drive was just one example of what became possible when different perspectives worked together, instead of one dominating the other. The final agreement took months to negotiate, but its core principles were simple. The Zephyrian hegemony would begin transitioning from conquest-based expansion to partnership-based cooperation. Species would be invited to join the Federation rather than forced into it. Conquered worlds would gradually be given the choice between independence and voluntary membership. In exchange, humanity would share their hybrid technologies and serve as mediators between the hegemony and the resistance movements they had inspired. Earth would become the first non-Zephyrian world to have full membership in what would now be called the Galactic Federation, rather than the Zephyrian hegemony. The announcement sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Species that had been conquered centuries earlier suddenly found themselves with options they never thought they would have. Some chose independence, others decided to remain within the Federation under the new partnership model, and a few decided to try something entirely. New Commander Sarah Chen now promoted to admiral and serving as Earth's representative to the Federation Council, often reflected on how much had changed. The species that had been expected to surrender in 3 days had instead rewritten the fundamental rules of galactic civilization. "Admiral," her aide said as they prepared for another council session, "we're receiving requests for technical assistance from 12 different species. Apparently they want to establish their own hybrid technology programs." Sarah nodded. The revolution that had begun with humanity's refusal to surrender was spreading throughout the galaxy. Species that had been forced into submission were rediscovering their potential for innovation and growth. "Schedule the assistance programs," she ordered. "And make sure we're sharing everything we've learned." The whole point of this was to prove that cooperation works better than domination. In his private office aboard the Federation flagship, former Fleet Admiral Zeth Cole reviewed the latest reports from across the galaxy. The transition hadn't been easy, and some elements within the old hegemony still resisted the changes. But the results were undeniable. The Federation was stronger, more innovative, and more prosperous than the hegemony had ever been. The diversity of species working together had produced technological and cultural advances that no single race could have achieved. Most importantly, the constant drain of resources needed to suppress rebellions had ended, allowing those resources to be directed toward exploration, science, and genuine progress. He opened his final report to the Federation Council, the document that would officially close the books on the conquest of Earth. After 2 years of war and negotiation, he had finally found the words to explain what had happened. "The human species represents a fundamental challenge to our understanding of intelligent life," he wrote. "They do not surrender because surrender to them is indistinguishable from extinction. When faced with impossible odds, they do not calculate the probability of victory. They calculate the cost of defeat and decide it is unacceptable." He paused, considering his next words carefully. This refusal to accept defeat forced them to evolve at an unprecedented rate. But more importantly, it forced us to evolve as well. The humans taught us that strength comes not from the ability to dominate others, but